Welcome to Real Clear Politics for Tuesday, October 28th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So there is a new survey out from a Democratic-leaning think tank that says 70% of voters now think the Democratic Party is out of touch. This is from a group called Welcome. And the report is entitled Deciding to Win. So, Carl, we've sort of seen this movie before where moderates try to move the party to the center by using data. For example, Progressive Policy Institute and the Democratic Leadership Council, yeah, thanks, advocated ideas that were then adopted by Bill Clinton in his first run. It worked in the past. Do you think it can work again? And what do you make of this report?
Well, you know, it was a blast from the past, Andy. So in 1988, so Michael Dukakis lost to George H.W. Bush. And, you know, in 84, of course, Ronald Reagan carried 49 of 50 states. He'd won a landslide in 1980 as well. And, you know, Nixon won 2 landslides. The Democrats, you know, it was this Republican electoral college we were told about, and people thought it was permanent. Well, it wasn't permanent. And it was a reflection of the nominees that the Democrats were putting up. And Look, I have great respect for George McGovern. He was a war hero. Walter Mondale gave his whole life to public service. He, by the way, was a reader of my morning note in the old days. And Mondale once sent me a nice note. And, you know, Michael Dukakis, I don't criticize these people on any kind of personal basis, but the electorate had told the Democratic Party in election after election, these people were too liberal on a host of issues. Now, the issues are somewhat different than they are now, the social issues. You know, gay marriage is the law of the land. If you're a progressive, we've made tremendous strides, but it never seems enough. And so the Democrats have come to one of those dead ends where they have mayors and governors who seem to be defending crime, not criminals, crime itself. You know, J.B. Pritzker, well, Jesus said, the poor you always have with you. That's J.B. Pritzker on violent crime and high murder rates. Well, it's a function of urban life. And the gay rights movement, which was one of the most successful and fastest civil rights movements in the history of this or any other country, is now in the frontiers where children are being proselytized about transgender issues, and men are allowed in girls' locker rooms in just county of Arlington, where I live, and all they have to do is claim I identify as a woman. And so the Democrats have gotten out again the way they do periodically, where they seem out of touch on these issues. And this is an attempt, you know, to sort of bring some common sense into it and say, all right, what are we as a party? We're the party. What do we believe in? We're supposed to stand for the working class. And
if I may interject, Carl.
Yeah, please.
The difference is that, well, 2 things. Number one is that while Democrats have lost to Trump twice in the last 3 elections, they haven't been blowouts. They've been relatively close elections, historically speaking. And therefore, there's a majority of Democrats that think, you know, man, if we were just a little bit better in our messaging, it's not the policies. It's just, you know, boy, we don't have any, you know, right-wing podcasters like Joe Rogan to push our message. I mean, it gives them the sense that they are not out of touch. In fact, they're still in the mainstream. And if they could just, you know, get a few more swing voters in the 7 battleground states, that you know, these elections can go differently. And number 2 is there used to be a real significant conservative / centrist presence within the Democratic Party, the Yellow Dogs and others, right? These Southerners who were culturally conservative, but identified as Democrats, voted as Democrats. They're all gone now. There is no moderating influence in the party. It's basically John Fetterman. And there's hardly anybody else. And we talk about this all the time, all the energy, all the emotion, all the policy is being pushed by folks on the left, Bernie, AOC, Mamdani. You know, I mean, you go down the list, it's like, it's never ending. And there doesn't seem to be the sort of moderate wing of the party has atrophied or been exterminated to the point where there are a couple bison roaming around, but that's about it.
All right, I just want to read a little bit of the report so people get a sense of what we're talking about. The principal author is Simon Bazelon, a young guy But this is what he says. He says, to win again, Democrats need to convince voters that we share their priorities by focusing more on issues voters do not think our party prioritizes highly enough. Parens, the economy, the cost of living, healthcare, border security, public safety, and focusing less on issues voters think we place too much emphasis on. Climate change, democracy, abortion, identity, and cultural issues. Carl, it does sound like, again, going back to Democratic Leadership Council and folks like that, this is sort of the common sense, common sense stuff that worked once. Do you think it will work again? Carl seems to think that the party has moved so far to the left that they don't have to or don't need to.
Tom thinks that. Tom thinks that, and look, he may be right. Tom may be right about this. I hear what you're saying, Andy, and can it work? I don't know. Tom's points are well taken, at least with me. I think that's right. I think that's the difference between now and 1990. I still don't know if these policies are much far left to George McGovern or Walter Mondale ever were. Let's be honest about that. But there's something even in this report, Andy, and you put your finger on it when you read that preamble. They don't say that they're wrong about any of these issues. Mm-hmm. They say that we prioritize them. There's an idea here that we just talk a little less about them. And I don't know that that's enough because, and I'm not saying that, you should wear hair shirts and, self-flagellate, but, they opened this border when Joe Biden was president. They all wanted to do it. It wasn't just Biden. Tom's mentioned this before. We all remember when they're in the debate, in the presidential election, they all the 15 of them up there, all raised their hand, decriminalize illegal immigration. And they've never acknowledged that this was a mistake. They want to talk less about crime. Well, they need to do more about crime. And in terms of transgender, you got Karine Jean-Pierre out there, on her book tour saying, well, we shouldn't throw trans, gay, LGBT people under the bus. And so even to this day, and this is to the point Tom was making, it's hard for Democrats to say, Gavin Newsom said it to Charlie Kirk, actually, on Gavin Newsom's first podcast. He had Charlie Kirk on, and he talked about sports, and Newsom was an athlete. He knows this. Tom was an athlete. He knows this. It's just, there's just a manifestly unfairness to letting men compete against women, boys compete against girls. And Newsom just casually admitted it. He's never followed through on that. Nobody in the party is saying, all right, we need to rethink some of these issues. Even though the environment's different, Bill Clinton went further than this. It wasn't just talking about things differently. It was doing things differently. Mm-hmm. Bill Clinton said, we're going to change welfare as we know it. He said he wanted a country where if you work hard and play by the rules, you're rewarded. Well, Democrats today aren't calling for their compatriots to work hard or play by the rules. And so, there's some differences now. And I think it would work again if they really did it. But this seems a little bit cosmetic. This was a courageous thing for these Democrats to do, and they're going to get a lot of heat for it. But I don't. It does smack of that thing. Well, if we just communicated a little differently, if we had a little better message, a little better press secretary. But the American people aren't stupid, and I think what's really needed is for the Democrats to reassess some of these policies. And I didn't even mention Israel, and their young people have turned against Israel. Reassess some of this, do some educating, have whoever the elder statesmen are in the party step forward and say, okay, here's what we believe in as Democrats.
Well, again, I think a Fetterman is the only one who's willing to sort of buck the trend and speak sort of the hard truths to the party, right? Bill Clinton famously, his sister soldier moment. You can't even have a sister soldier moment because you will get dragged into the public square by these Democrats and canceled and excommunicated.
But Tom, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not willing to concede that point, and here's why. Isn't that what the 2028 primary season is going to be about? Isn't it going to answer these questions? Because there are going to be some centrist Democrats running.
Like who? Rahm Emanuel, maybe, but does he have a real chance? I mean,
that's my point. That's what
it's
the Gavin Newsom who was on Charlie Kirk instead of the Gavin Newsom who, is in some of these other places. Gretchen Whitmer seems to be.
Gavin Newsom who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. Hard scrabble Gav.
We're going to have to relitigate that because I listened to that thing and I thought what Gavin Newsom said yesterday about playing sports was actually quite affecting. He was talking about how it helped him reconnect. It gave him confidence in school, helped him reconnect with his,
Oh my, okay. Put a
helped
pin
him
in
re-
that one, Carl.
hold on, helped him reconnect with his father. And I actually thought I don't think I think we'd be sneering on this podcast. That's not the
I
real
don't,
clear. That's
I'm
not the
not
real clear
sneering
way.
about sports, Carl. I think sports are fantastic ways for kids to build character and learn all sorts of great life lessons. And I have no problem with Gavin Newsom being a star athlete. What I do have a problem with is him pretending and trying to pass himself off as a mac and cheese, Wonder Bread eating, you know, middle class, lower class, working class kid. I mean, that's just not who he was.
He didn't. You're wrong. He didn't grow up with money. But you've
Jesus.
opened the door here, as
I'm
they
sorry.
say. And
Who are his
if you
friends
ever
again?
if you ever cover the courts, you open the door with that line of questioning. Did you guys stay up and watch that baseball game last night? I did.
We got we were over on this segment already, but yes, no, I could not stay up. But I also feel like I really missed a historic event because I went to bed.
Well, Freddie Freeman is the new Mr. October. He's Reggie
Oh my
Jackson.
God, he's
But
unbelievable.
But Shohei Ohtani is Babe Ruth. This guy, in his first four at bats, he hits 2 home runs and 2 doubles. And so what do they walk him 5 consecutive times. These are things that have never happened before in a World Series and will never happen again. 9 times up, 9 times on base.
And a 7-hour game. How long was it?
I think 6 hours and 40 minutes.
Jesus, yeah.
But I
You stayed up for it.
Yes, but I may have slept through the 13th inning because I thought Shohei was walked 4 times, and I read in the paper this morning it was 5. So I may have nodded off during one of his intentional walks.
All right. Well, guys, now we're over. So we're going to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. We'll be back with more right after this.
That was a rough shoehorn right there.
Yeah, it wasn't
Great transition.
smoothest-
In other news,
Since you said that, let me talk about Mars.
Something totally unrelated.
Gavin played baseball.
Talk about colonizing Mars.
We talked about this a little yesterday, but Steve Bannon gave this interview to the Economist. And he made some headlines, and we talked about his contention that there was this plan for Trump to have a 3rd term. But he also talked about some other things. So I wanted to play some of that interview for you guys today and get your response. So here's Bannon. He's talking about redistricting, and he's also talks about Trump's special place in history.
To avoid actual civil conflict, which I think you're seeing right now, the beginning of the harbinger of it. If you want to stop that, you have to bind together tighter. We, as a populist nationalist movement, as a MAGA movement, we need to do like the redistricting fights. We need to get, this is why I was down in Texas. We need to get the House in a situation that is permanently defendable by the MAGA movement, right? So it's a blocking mechanism. And take that, like I said, you move a maximalist strategy with a sense of urgency, and you seize the institutions. Seize them and then purge them. We seize the institution, purge them, and that's why you've got guys, it's not the Doge crap. This is serious people like Russ Vought and others that have spent years thinking this whole plan through. We must strike, and we must strike now. Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys crazy, but he's a vehicle of divine providence. He's an instrument. He's very imperfect. He's not churchy, not particularly religious, but he's an instrument of divine will, and you can tell this of how he's pulled this off. We need him for at least one more term.
13 minutes of the interview is on YouTube. I really go listen to it. You know, I put those swooshes in there just so the audience was, obviously I'm eliding the bites, but really go and listen to it. You'll see that I don't think that I, by editing, changed the meaning of anything he said. So Tom,
You're going to get sued for editing.
yeah, but possibly a pretty unfiltered look at Steve Bannon's mind. And I just wonder, you know, this is at least part of the MAGA movement, but how representative of it is that kind of thinking when it comes to people around Trump? And what do you make of his view?
So that is a great question. I mean, how big is the Bannon wing of the MAGA movement? Because as you just played in that clip, and as you hear when you listen to that full interview, Bannon is a revolutionary. I mean, he sees this. At one point, one of the economists says, "Is this evolution?" He says, "This isn't evolution. This is revolution," which is the inverse of the Joe Biden comment from 2024. Bannon wants, as he said, he wants to seize all these institutions and purge them, which, echoes sort of Mao, little Maoist strategy. But look, he sees this as this existential struggle for the country, the soul of the country, and there are a lot of people in the MAGA movement who feel that way, who feel that if Democrats are allowed to gain control again, that that the country is lost, that it's getting be turned over to the Marxists, and quite frankly, they feel like it's been this slow march of socialism that has taken place in this country over the last 20, 30, 40 years, and the previous Republicans didn't fight nearly hard enough to block the Democrats and save the country as they know it and think of it. Even Newt Gingrich was, not enough of a fighter in the Republican Revolution of '96. So, yeah, it's worth listening to because he does represent a portion of the MAGA movement. And the question is, how big is that portion? I don't know.
Yeah, Carl, he's a documentary maker. That's how I met him. I met him in Washington, talking about documentary films with him. So he does sort of have a view and an idea about rhetoric and images that I think it goes beyond maybe a lot of sort of your run-of-the-mill politicos. And he's a colorful guy. But when you hear some of this, it is kind of bracing. I mean, and if you watch the interview, the two interviewers who are these British editors at The Economist are they can barely contain their shock at what he says. Did you have the same reaction, or what do you make of it?
Well, yeah, and I was thinking as you were, Andy, because the first time I heard the name Steve Bannon was from Scott Conroy, who was a young reporter who worked for us. He actually predated my coming to Real Clear. Tom hired him. He worked, and he had pitched me on a story. He says there's this filmmaker, and he thinks Trump could actually be president. and Scott talked to him, and he does think Bannon is both a political theorist and as you point out, a cinematographer. So he thinks in these grand these metaphors that lend themselves to film, but also invoke history. He sounds like the right-wing Saul Alinsky when he talks like this. He's trying to undo all these things that I do use the phrase "long march through the institutions." Andy, you alluded to that. That's what he thinks happened. I don't think he's wrong about that. But it invokes other issues for me. Is the Nietzsche line. If you're going to fight monsters, be careful you don't become a monster. You become. It's an old theme in Judeo-Western culture: becoming what you hate, becoming what you despise. And when he talks casually about civil war, that's alarming. When he alludes to the secret plan to have Trump have a third term, that sounds like what Trump's enemies say about Trump. But here's the other thing: he's radicalized. They put him in jail. They went after him. He's one of that litany of Trump people. Whenever my Democratic friends say, "Carl, they're criminalizing political differences," where have you been for 9 years? There's this whole list of people they prosecuted and threw in jail, basically because they worked for Trump. Now, I don't say none of them committed any crimes. Bannon's crime was, contempt, Congress. But, I don't say all these people were pure as the driven snow. But we all know why they were in the gun sights of the Justice Department and in the Congress, because they were Trump people. And now, now we're told that going after James Comey is the end of it threatens the whole rule of law in the country. And if you don't have to be Steve Bannon to say to these people, to want to knock these people in the head and say, hello, McFly,
Right. Yeah, no, he spent 4 months in Danbury prison. And I grew up in Connecticut. Danbury was far away from where I was. But
all right, Andy, trivia question. Who were the lefties who were at Danbury when you and I were in college? Jesuit is a clue.
Oh, Father Drinan?
Berrigan.
Berrigan's the Berrigans, not Father Drinan, sorry, but the Berrigans. Anyway, it is not a country club prison. That's my only point. And he did come out of there saying that he learned at Danbury, that's where he was really convinced that Trump would be reelected. And this wasn't that long ago. This was like last year that he was in prison, Tom. He was sort of on the outs with Trump for a while, but it seems like he's back in. And, to Carl's point, this prison time has sort of given him street cred and MAGA that very few people can compete with, right?
Well, I'm sure he'd prefer not to have the street cred of spending time in prison, but it certainly has, to Carl's point, I think, shaped his experience and philosophy about, where we are and what needs to be done, and probably radicalized him even further. But look, his show, The War Room, is a very popular show. Gets a lot of people tuned into that. He gets all sorts of guests that from the MAGA universe that go through the issues that he thinks are important. And so, yeah, again, I think he was initially, when he was brought into the White House, I mean, the reporting was that he was kind of like a bull in a china shop, and he was stepping on toes and breaking things and made some enemies, and then eventually found his way out. I think he's a much more effective operator on the outside as a spokesperson for sort of the MAGA universe and MAGA world than he ever was inside. And obviously Trump has a whole new set of folks. As he mentioned Russ Vought as one of the, serious people. I did think it was interesting, that clip you played, that this isn't that Doge crap. Like, that
Right.
was,
Yeah.
that
Wasn't
was
that
like,
interesting? Yeah.
Elon was like, that was playtime. And I mean, he was so dismissive of that. And he does not like Elon, and took shots at him when he and Trump were close at the time. So, yeah, look, Bannon's not going anywhere. I mean, he's going to be, the question is what happens. And by the way, for the record, I don't believe the 2028 nonsense. We talked about it yesterday. I think Trump is going to pass the baton to probably JD Vance or Marco Rubio or somebody else. And then the question is, well, what happens then? And what happens to the MAGA movement? What happens to Steve Bannon? Is he as popular as he is now? Does his influence within the administration, if it is a Vance administration or Rubio, does it wane? That'll be interesting to watch play out in the coming, couple of years.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too, the way he talked, about a permanent majority in the House was what he was looking for. But I will say this about, and again, I wish I could have played more of the clips. He doesn't call for revolution. What he says is this is a way of forestalling violent revolution in the United States. It's sort of a prophylactic measure, I guess. But Carl, when Democrats hear this kind of rhetoric, their heads must explode.
Well, it confirms for them what think. And there's always a danger in politics and in life of believing your own press releases, believing your own BS. And the Democrats have been calling, Trump Hitler and every other name they can think of for now 10 years, since the summer of 2015. And then when a guy comes forward and says, basically he wants to purge these people from from the universities, from the media, they start to think, well, maybe some of that stuff I said is true. Maybe, holy cow, this is worse than I thought it was.
Guys, the House Oversight Committee released its report on its investigation into former President Joe Biden's mental acuity during his time in office. And the report says, among other things, that the executive orders signed by Autopen, including some presidential pardons, should be voided because they were authorized with, quote, no approval traceable to the president's own consent. So, Tom, how consequential is this report, and what do you make of it?
I don't know how consequential it is. I don't have a problem with them investigating this. I mean, I do. The idea that, there was this tight inner circle of aides, unelected, around Biden who were, insulating him from stuff on the outside, and also, basically running the government, making decisions. I think that's worth investigating. That's not something we want under any administration. I mean, we want the executive to be the one who is answerable to the people, is the one who's clearly making these decisions. And the Autopen, while it's been used in the past, you pair that with Joe Biden's clear issues that he was dealing with, I think it deserves to be investigated. Now, what's going to come of this? Are they going to rescind some of these executive orders? Are they going to, I'm not even sure how they would go about doing that, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not. If it does happen, I mean, it's not hugely consequential in sort of the specifics of it, but more broadly speaking, I think it is something it's something worth investigating because we don't want it to be happening again.
Well, there were some things in that report, that were new, at least unless you've been following the story on a day-to-day basis. But one of them was, the Republicans on the committee made the point of saying that, and they're right, that the presidential pardon power, which is nearly absolute for federal crimes and not subject to any checks and balances, the founding fathers wanted it that way. It cannot be delegated to others. It has to come from the president. And that doesn't, mean that the president can't tell somebody to do it and then they do it. But they had trouble, and one of the reasons they had trouble is a lot of these former White House aides stonewalled them in figuring out exactly how the chain of command worked. Who made some of these decisions? It sounds like Hunter Biden was issuing some of these orders. Joe Biden, after he left office in June, made a public statement and sounded very lucid when he said, I made all these decisions. I made all these pardons. That's a dead letter issue. And he sounded convincing when he said it. But when you get into what this committee was being told, there's unanswered questions. And the other part about the report that I find disquieting is these people who took the Fifth Amendment,
Right.
personal physician, First Lady Jill Biden's a former chief of staff, plead the fifth when asked this question: were you ever asked to lie about the president's health? Well, someone ought to grant immunity and get the answer to that, because that's the whole ball game right there. And I just don't. There was this cover up, and it's coming on in every. And we
Not according to Karine Jean-Pierre, Carl.
Yeah,
You saw him every day. Can I just say
seems to be the least astute observer of the
Well, I want to talk about her in a second.
But can I just add one more thing? One of the problems too with the pardon process now, and this gets to the point that Carl was making, is this is a power. It's used too much now. And Biden was issuing like these blanket pardons of all these people. There's no way he could have possibly gone through every single one of these cases and looked at them in detail individually and signed off on them. He was presented them by his staff and decided to, I don't know how many thousands of people he pardoned, but it was a lot. And that's, that's become.
There were categories of people. Look, if the White House chief of staff and the attorney general, whoever at the Justice Department is doing the pardons, comes and said, listen, there's these cases, there's the category cases. I'll use the original one from my time covering the White House. People selling crack cocaine got much harsher sentences than people selling powder cocaine. That's a class of persons. That's like pardoning. That's like giving amnesty to Vietnam draft dodgers. You don't have to know all their names. You sign it. I have no. That's constitutionally protected. There's a sound precedent for that. But when you can't have Hunter Biden making a decision to pardon himself,
well,
and Biden knew this. The President Biden knew this because that was one of the few he signed himself.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think.
But you can't have Hunter. But you can't have. But there was some evidence in this report, or suspicion on part of the Republicans, and they didn't seem to say more than they knew. But that Hunter Biden was in on the pardon process in deciding some of these other people.
Yeah, but I guess the thing about this is the pardons that people care about. Biden, for example, pardoning his own family. Certainly, Biden knew about those. So I mean, it's. I doubt that somehow. I mean, it just stretches the imagination that somehow Joe Biden didn't know he was pardoning everyone other than Jill when it came to high crimes and misdemeanors.
Dr. Jill committed no crime. She doesn't need to be pardoned.
But let's talk about Karine Jean-Pierre since you brought her up. She was interviewed in the New Yorker. People should read this too, but she didn't do a very good job of explaining why she was leaving the party or what really happened when the Democrats, jettisoned Joe Biden. But she did say this, however. She said, quote, "You have to think about how I'm thinking about this as a Black woman who is part of the LGBTQ community and living in the time where I also don't think Democrats leadership is protecting vulnerable people in the way it should." Kind of a word salad, and it goes on like that for pages, Carl. But what did you make of the interview, and have you taken a look at it?
I read it all. She said it over and over again. Playing the race card is not doing it justice. That seemed to be her explanation for everything, including her interviewer was simply trying to get her to say, well, why do you resent these Democrats who made Joe Biden quit? Because did you see something we didn't see? And she doesn't answer that question. She's contentious, and he's just trying to get her to explain what she's saying, and she doesn't seem to know what she's saying. It was an incoherent thing. At one point, she says that it was an insult to her, a black woman, that Kamala Harris anybody even questioned whether she should be the nominee. But then she writes in her book that she didn't think Kamala Harris should win.
Right.
So he's
Could
trying to
win.
get her to say, so are you saying that to spare the feelings of certain identity politics voters, the party should have lost to Trump on purpose? And that's when she said, well, if you were a black woman, you'd understand what I'm saying. And it was a like I say, it's an incoherent political philosophy. And it's complete opposite of what we talked about at the beginning of the show, Democrats wanting to win. She's basically saying it would be better to lose, even to Trump, than to, question Kamala Harris's credentials.
Yeah, even though, she points out in the book, and she says in the interview that she didn't believe Harris could win in the first place, Tom.
Well, right. I mean, look, it is a fascinating interview. It's definitely one worth reading, and
it'll save you the price of buying the book. You realize you won't have to read the book.
Yeah, I mean, look, we already knew that she was not a very effective spokesperson, and that's putting it kindly. And then she writes this book, which, to sell books, she titles it Independent and comes up with this idea that she's leaving the party because of what she saw inside the Biden White House. And
no, because of Democrats being mean to Joe Biden.
Well,
that's why she's leaving the party, right? I think.
Well, yeah. It really doesn't make any sense. She says that Biden was treated poorly, and then Isaac Chotiner, who's the one who did the interview, says, but if the paramount thing of the election was winning and beating Donald Trump, and the polls showed Biden losing, why shouldn't people ask him to step aside? Why shouldn't that be a legitimate debate to have within the party? And then she says, well, just he'd given his whole life to public service, and people were so mean to him. And then you mentioned that, then she says about Kamala Harris, well, it was rude to her to, the way she was treated, but she couldn't win either. I mean, it's just, she was kind of going in circles and couldn't find her way out of the cul-de-sac, because I think Carl's right. I mean, ultimately her points really they're not coherent. And so at the end of the day, by the way, she's not an effective enough communicator, I think, not agile enough on her feet to be able to speak about this stuff. And so, and I do look, she's done, I don't know how many interviews, like 5, 6, 7 that I've seen. And in every single one, she mentions that she's I woke up every morning as a black queer woman in this administration. It's like, I'm not saying she maybe shouldn't say that, but to say it every time and to make her identity the center of this story is part of the problem with Democrats. It really doesn't have anything to do with her identity.
Yeah, it's also raised the question, if you leave the Democratic Party because they are not respectful enough of LGBTQ issues, where the heck do you go? I mean, you're
Democratic Socialist Party?
I guess so. Maybe that's it. Anyway. All right. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Susan Crabtree is going to be here, and we're going to talk with her about Prop 50 out in California and redistricting. So don't go away. We'll be back after this. We're joined now by Susan Crabtree. She's RCP's national political correspondent. Susan, welcome back to the program.
Wait, Andy, we've got you outnumbered. We have 2 Californians.
That's right.
I know. Well, I will try to hold up the East Coast end here. But Susan, we're about a week away now, or just a week away from the vote in your state, California, over Prop 50. This is the proposition designed to redistrict the state to favor Democrats in retaliation for what is happening in Texas. There's new Emerson poll out, says 57% will likely support it. Just 37% oppose it. So first, let's start there. How did this thing move from being a toss-up at best when it was announced, I think, to what is starting to look like a pretty sure thing?
Well, it's not looking good for Republicans out here at all. You're going to have, I predict that there's going to be a 4 to 6 seat loss, just in about a week. And the only backstop is really what the Supreme Court is going to be doing. But it's a money situation. It's an anti-Trump situation. You have national Democrats weighing in left and right. Barack Obama has been running ads. He's stepped out of, he hasn't been as active as he normally is. He stepped right in, waded into this very fraught campaign out here. It's one of the most expensive ballot initiatives in California state history, racking up close to 120, 150 million, sorry, in ads and that have and direct mail. Got a piece right here from one of my neighbors right here recently. This one is actually from the Republican National Committee. But the Republican side hasn't been as good about getting their message out, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
And so,
Susan,
Carl,
I want
why
to
is,
ask you. I
oh,
want to ask you
I was going to ask you a question,
Yeah, go
Carl,
ahead,
first,
Andy.
which
Yeah.
is just why is that? Why have the Republicans not been as active on this as one would expect?
Well, Susan knows this, and this goes back to, I mean, years and years in the referendum process. There's some fatigue there, and you got to come up with this money every year. But Republicans have gotten used to losing in California. It's an odd mindset, and the amount of money you would have had to wage to counter this, and to the ads on the Democratic side are there dystopian ads. This these terrible things that Republicans are doing and Trump is doing and authoritarian. And you would have had to run a good government campaign. It would have had to been almost by definition a positive campaign, which would require to spend 3 times as much money and really educate the voters. And that what you're telling voters is we in California dealt with this. We dealt with it pretty well. Not great. Republicans are still vastly underrepresented. But under this, they're gonna take half our seats. There are more Republicans in California than any other state. It may surprise you, but it's true. Yes, we're outnumbered by Democrats, but the Democrats, they're talking about tyranny. They're using tyranny. They want to disenfranchise people. It's not good government, and in the long run, it's not for good governments. Not good government. Think about how much money that would have required, Susan. A relentless barrage of educational ads, which are hard to do, expensive, they don't always work. You would have had to spend 2 or 3 or 400 million dollars on this, and the Republicans are out of the practice of doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, luckily, for the Republicans, you had Charlie Munger step in and provide the most money, $30 million. He's the Berkshire Hathaway heir, and not Charlie Munger, but Charlie Munger's son. And he was active in getting this independent commission in place with Governor Schwarzenegger in 2008. And then another vote, it was the voters of California that approved this independent good government commission that took it out of the hands of politicians. And they provided somewhat, I mean, I would say that most Californians would concede that even that commission is swayed toward the Democratic side. But at least it was something that was not directly controlled by the supermajority Democrat-controlled legislature in California. So, I feel like they didn't just do a great campaign at all. It's sort of a taxation without representation, what this government, our country was founded upon. And you don't see you see that sort of extreme language on the Democratic side saying this is about Donald Trump, a vote against Donald Trump. Donald Trump is destroying democracy. Democracy is on the ballot. But this is actually, the most small d democratic thing that's been around. I mean, I know it's going on the other side, and I think that's equally
Susan,
undemocratic.
Susan,
Equally.
yeah, let's not pull punches. It's Orwellian to say this is defending democracy. It's defending Democratic Party House seats. That's all it's supposed to do. I have a question though. So I think there's what, 9 members now in the California delegation, congressional. So they wanted to take it. They want to take it down. Newsom. They've identified these seats. They're going to try and get as many Republicans. You're going to have 4 or 5. I guess 4 Republican seats that no Republican could ever lose, and then one looks like it's on the cusp. But I guess my question is, if Donald Trump passes from the scene and you get a Republican presidential nominee who more palatable to Californians, could this backfire on Democrats? Is there any way that they've made seats competitive that wouldn't have been competitive, and the voters could have the last laugh? Is that possible with these maps that they're talking about?
One of them is strangely shaped like an elephant. It's how bizarre it is. I think he's targeting, Kevin Kiley, one of the rising stars in the Republican House. He's been vocally fighting this. I think you had him on the show a while back.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think it looks good because the get out the vote and the all mail-in voting in California really favors Democrats across the state. I kind of see this as sort of Gavin Newsom is just digging in. He's gotten so much money. It's sort of a preview of his 2028 race. He's gone in with George Soros. He's putting millions into the Yes on 50 side, and the unions, the teacher unions. Those are his big two. And he's even put in a $2 million from leftover from his recall campaign. So he's personally invested in this because, frankly, what else is he having to run on? He told CBS News the other day, you have to know the why for why you're running, or whether it looks too transparent and the voters won't buy it. So now he's giving the Democrats something to rally around. And even he got President Obama on his side. On the other side, Schwarzenegger, it's how many voters, especially young voters, remember the blockbuster sort of,
The Terminator.
The Terminator. I mean, he's not a forceful voice, and we haven't seen any ads with him in it, which is interesting too. So you have these AOC and you have Elizabeth Warren and you have Barack Obama, these pretty leaders of the party, and it's really hard to compete with that.
Yeah, I guess if it passes, it will be a big feather in his cap. Hey, I only got a few minutes left here, but I did want to ask you about something else in that Emerson poll, which was interesting. Katie Porter is in a statistical tie with Steve Hilton, the Republican. Now, put this in context. She's at 16%, he's at 15%, and then there's a bunch of other people in the field. It's a pretty crowded field.
This is the jungle primary, right?
Yeah, the jungle primary. But what do you make of Katie Porter's position right now, I guess? And what about Steve Porter? I mean, at 16%, he's 15%. He's a contender.
Yeah, Steve Hilton has been, a barnstormer. He is going up and down the state, and he's all over social media all the time. And he has a very upbeat message. He has this golden, keep California golden message. And Katie Porter just, basically saying her chances. I mean, I still think she will prevail in the general, strangely enough, with, that terrible interview where she wouldn't answer and stormed off and
Right.
Screaming at the staffer. And she imploded against Adam Schiff as well. People thought she was going to do a lot better in that Senate race. So, it's interesting to see the Republican out front. And I think he will do well, and he's earned it. Even though he's, British, and a lot of Californians have an issue with that, but people are yearning for fresh leadership, and certainly they're not thinking Katie Porter has what it takes anymore, at least.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Hey, we're going to check back with you on this story maybe next week. You've been
Sounds
listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I've been with Susan Crabtree and Carl Cannon. On behalf of everyone here at Real Clear Politics, have a great evening, and we'll be back here tomorrow.